Imagine you're standing at a stove. There's something raw in the pan. Heat hits it, the color changes, the smell fills the room, and a few minutes later you're eating something that used to look and taste completely different. You've done this 1,000 times without thinking twice about it. Here's a question that sounds simple and isn't. Why does every single human being on Earth do this and not one other animal ever has? Not chimps, who share almost 99% of your DNA. Not crows, who solve puzzles that stump toddlers. Not dolphins, not elephants, not a single one of the millions of species that has ever existed on this planet across billions of years. Every predator on Earth eats its kill raw. Every scavenger eats raw. You are the only exception in the entire history of life. And by the end of this video, you'll understand that this isn't really a story about food. It's the story of how you ended up with the exact brain you're using to watch this right now. Let's start with the obvious guess. Most people assume it's simply intelligence. We're the smart ones, so naturally we figured it out. Except that explanation collapses almost immediately once you look at what other animals are actually capable of. In 2015, researchers at Harvard ran a series of experiments on chimpanzees, and what they found should unsettle that assumption completely. Chimps, given the choice, consistently preferred cooked food over raw. They understood correctly that a device could transform raw food into cooked food. They would voluntarily give up a raw slice of food they could eat immediately, and wait patiently for a cooked version of the same food to be ready later. Some of them even carried raw food across a room specifically to put it into the cooking device. In other words, chimpanzees already have almost the entire mental toolkit required to cook: preference, understanding, patience, planning. The only thing missing is control of the flame itself. So if it isn't raw brain power, what's actually stopping every other species on the planet? The answer sits somewhere much older and much stranger than intelligence. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Fire is one of the most universal danger signals in the entire animal kingdom. Nearly every species that has ever encountered wildfire has the exact same hardwired response. Run, flee, get away from the heat and the smoke as fast as possible. This instinct is so deep and so consistent across totally unrelated species that it might be one of the oldest survival rules evolution has ever writ. And to cook, you have to do the opposite of everything that instinct tells you. You have to walk toward the flame, sit close to it. Stay there, unmoving for extended stretches of time, tending it instead of running from it. That is not a small ask for a nervous system built by millions of years of fire equals death. Somewhere in our evolutionary past, something in the human brain learned to override one of the most universal fear responses in nature and turn a source of danger into a tool you sit next to on purpose. No other lineage on Earth ever made that particular override permanent, but overriding fear only gets you access to the fire. It doesn't explain why holding onto it was worth the risk. For that, the numbers get genuinely wild. Harvard biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham has spent decades building a case that cooking didn't just improve human life, it physically built the brain you're thinking with right now. Here's the reasoning. Your brain, at rest, burns through roughly a quarter of your entire body's energy budget. That's an enormous, expensive organ to keep running. Meanwhile, chimpanzees in the wild spend close to half of every single day just chewing raw food, tough fruit, fibrous plants, food that gives up its calories reluctantly and only after brutal amounts of grinding and digesting. Cooking breaks that math wide open. Heat softens tissue, unwinds proteins, and converts hard-to-digest starches into something your gut can absorb almost immediately. The same food cooked hands your body dramatically more usable energy for dramatically less digestive effort. Wrangham's argument is that this newly available surplus of energy is what allowed a smaller gut and a bigger brain to trade places across evolutionary time, freeing up calories that used to be spent purely on digestion and redirecting them into growing the most expensive organ any animal has ever carried around. Not every scientist agrees on the details. Some researchers argue it was energy-dense animal fat and marrow, not fire, driving the same brain growth, since hard physical proof of controlled fire is surprisingly rare that far back in the fossil record. And that gap is real. Biological evidence suggests our ancestors may have needed cooked foods extra energy as far back as 1.8 million years ago, but our clearest physical proof of actual controlled fire, burnt bone and ash found deep inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, only goes back to roughly a million years, with newer research now pushing that number closer to 1.7 million. Whatever the exact date, one pattern holds steady across every version of this debate. Somewhere in that window, our ancestors' bodies changed in a way that only makes sense with cooked food already on the table. And there was a second, quieter benefit hiding inside that same fire. It wasn't just softening food, it was sterilizing it. Raw meat and raw plants carry bacteria, parasites, and toxins that have spent millions of years evolving specifically to survive inside a living gut. Heat destroys almost all of it. Every early human who cooked their meat thoroughly was, without knowing a single thing about microbiology, running a full decontamination process on their dinner. Every one of your ancestors who happened to prefer their meat charred instead of raw was quietly filtering out threats that could otherwise kill them slowly from the inside. That preference had nothing to do with taste at first. It had everything to do with which ancestors lived long enough to have children. So you'd think, given how useful fire clearly is, that other animals would have stumbled onto at least the hunting side of it by now. And here's the twist, because incredibly, one group actually has. In the tropical savannas of northern Australia, at least 3 species of birds of prey, the black kite, the whistling kite, and the brown falcon, have been documented doing something no one expected from a bird. They pick up smoldering sticks in their talons or beaks, carry them across a fire break, and deliberately drop them into unburned grass to start a brand new fire. Indigenous Australians have described this exact behavior for generations, and in 2017 researchers finally confirmed it formally, gathering first-hand accounts from rangers, firefighters, and Aboriginal elders across multiple regions. The birds do this because a fresh fire front sends insects, lizards, and small mammals fleeing directly into the open, straight into an easy meal. These birds are genuinely using fire as a hunting tool on purpose, but notice exactly where the behavior stops. They spread the fire, they exploit what it flushes out of hiding, and then they eat their prey exactly the way every other bird of prey on the planet does, raw on the spot with nothing about the meal itself ever touching that fire. An entire species figured out how to weaponize flame and still never took the one additional step that would have turned it into a kitchen. That's the piece that makes humans genuinely strange once you actually break it down. Getting close to fire isn't unique to us. Wanting the reward on the other side of cooked food isn't unique to us. Chimpanzees already crave it. Even manipulating fire as a hunting tool isn't unique to us. A handful of Australian raptors do exactly that. What's unique is that one lineage of primates managed to stack every one of those pieces on top of each other, override the fear, tolerate the flame long enough to tend it, and then take the genuinely strange final step of pointing that fire directly at your own food on purpose every single day, until it rewired the very organ making the decision. So the next time you're standing at that stove watching something raw turn into something you actually want to eat, you're not just making dinner. You're looking at the last link in a chain that a bird could only get halfway through, that a chimpanzee could only imagine, and that your own ancestors spent well over 1 million years perfecting, one meal at a time, until it built the brain currently reading this sentence.